This is going to be a weird one, but bear with me because I think it will be worth it. We're going to be talking about the complete story of Secret Wars 2. It's a very different sort of event, but I think it's worth your time and it really has an incredible ending. So stay tuned for this one. Beyond time, space, and many dimensions lies another universe, very different from our own. In that other world, one being embodies all the power and energy within. And he is coming here. Now. He enters space at a random point, for time and position have no meaning to him. He moves at an unimaginable speed, as physics and friction are as easily dismissed as they are noticed. He finds one galaxy in particular, which sparked his interest not long ago. And within this celestial body, he finds a very particular planet. In the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, the molecule man sees a flash of light in the distance. He pays it no mind at first, but pretty soon it is apparent more is going on. Molecule man, real name Owen Reese, sees a figure in the distance and realizes it's him. He's here. In the home of Moira McTaggart, Professor Xavier wakes with a start. He can detect a deadly presence. Charles uses his mind to reach out to Captain America to warn the hero of the disturbing news. There is no doubt, for there is no other being as powerful or formidable in the known universe. They've all encountered him once before, when he orchestrated the first Secret Wars. And now here, on Earth, the Beyonder has arrived. Oh, we're all gonna die. On the roof of an unspecified building looking over all of New York City, the Beyonder observes the buzzing metropolis, pondering the last few days. He doesn't comprehend much of human existence, but he does know that experience is the best way to learn. Based on his encounter with Captain America, he has created what he believes to be the best possible human body for himself, so that he can finally determine the true nature of the human race. The results are puzzling. It takes him a while to get used to the chronological nature of time and the rules of gravity, before the Beyonder begins to warm up to the vivid nature of human experience. In no time at all, he begins experimenting with food and drink, though he has trouble getting it quite right. Seeking help, he finds a being he recognizes from his experiments during the first Secret Wars, Peter Parker. Peter is unable to answer the being's larger questions about the meaning of human existence, and suggests that Reed Richards, the smartest man Peter knows, might be a better option. The Beyonder then begins to experience a sensation he doesn't understand, and Peter realizes this being has to go to the washroom. With some careful guidance, Peter helps him through the new activity before he vanishes completely. The Beyonder finds Mr. Fantastic working with the rest of the Fantastic Four. When Reed begins to explain to this being that he doesn't have the answer to everything, the Beyonder vanishes before the superhero scientist can elaborate any further. Now convinced that those he encountered on Battleworld aren't yielding any real answers, the Beyonder decides to look elsewhere. He finds a new outfit for himself before he is reprimanded by the homeless person for stealing the clothes. For the first time, this cosmic being is introduced to the concept of capitalism. And when a gang attempts to mug him, he is told by the homeless person that the Heroes for Hire might be able to offer further aid for this strange being. He goes to Luke Cage and Iron Fist and asks them about the meaning of the world, one filled with so many different sentient beings instead of one unified power like the Beyonder and his universe. Iron Fist claims that humans strive to achieve what the Beyonder already is, and that they seek a oneness with the universe they exist in. Luke, however, disagrees, insisting that it is money that gives humans meaning. The Beyonder thinks he understands. Multiple beings in this divided universe result in feelings of incompleteness, leading to desire, something this being has never experienced before. Thankful for the service provided by these heroes, and now understanding that he should pay for such a thing, he proceeds to do so, by turning their headquarters into gold. Aw man, the Beyonder keeps changing my clothes, and my relative positioning in this room, and the lighting. How could he do such a thing? Anyways, I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about this story because it's really weird, and I think providing a little bit of context as we go along is worth doing. First of all, I want to get into why we're here. We've noticed there's been a lot of activity on some of our older Secret Wars videos, and I think it's because with Endgame having come and gone, there's a lot up in the air in terms of the future direction for the MCU. But with Disney having acquired rights to use the X-Men characters in their movies again, I think there's a lot of options for them to use Secret Wars as a sort of means to sort of bring the X-Men into the storyline. It might not be the case, but in terms of something that the MCU can build up towards again, now that Thanos has come and gone and that sort of thing, I really think Secret Wars is an excellent option. And between the 1984 version and the modern version that only came out a few years ago, there's a lot of really cool plot lines and moments coming up. But there is one Secret Wars story that we haven't covered, and that's Secret Wars 2. So today we're going to talk about that in a little more detail here. Now before we get into the rest of this video, I do ask if you like it and enjoy yourself, subscribe to our channel. You can do so very easily, and consider supporting us through Patreon, and you can find a link to that in the video description below. By the way, before I forget and Beyonder changes my outfit again, we did also make a review about the first Secret Wars, and you can find that by clicking on this button thing we made in the top corner here. Yes, looking over here. Having apparently discovered sleep, the Beyonder is woken up by a police officer and begins to explore his newfound knowledge of commerce, ultimately becoming an employee for a mob boss. It doesn't take him long to rise up in status thanks to his powers, and he even refines a sense of style for himself, before he begins to embrace the more decadent aspects of human desire. However, for a being so strong, taking over the criminal underworld of New York City is a trivial task. Within a moment of meeting the man, the Kingpin is no match for the Beyonder's will, and surrenders all his power to this cosmic entity. Within a day, the Beyonder is given control of the nation. It only takes him a thought to completely dominate all minds on Earth. In Colorado, the Molecule Man is alarmed to discover his girlfriend Volcana's individual molecules have been brought under the control of another being. While the Beyonder briefly enjoys the unquestioned loyalty of everything in the universe, he still has this strange, new sense of desire and incompleteness that is completely foreign to him. Talking this over with some of the criminals he recently dealt with, the Beyonder determines that perhaps it is the struggle for need, rather than the fulfillment of it, that embodies the human experience. He looks over the earth and observes various humans struggling to find what it is they desire. He decides to seek out Owen Reese, the Molecule Man, and Marshall Rosenberg, Volcana, for guidance. The Beyonder asks Owen about a specific form of desire he is having trouble wrapping his head around: love. Though Reese has trouble explaining the concept of love in and of itself, he finds it easy to talk about Marcia and their relationship together. The Beyonder thanks him for his advice, but before he leaves, Owen warns the cosmic being that love is good, but it can be dangerous, even for powerful folk like themselves. Though by now the Beyonder has been with plenty of women, he is quick to deduce any love that he has for them is transactional. They like him because of how he is able to give them pleasure that no other human can offer. Instead, he decides to reach out into the universe, seeking potential men and women who might like this being on a deeper level. In the end, he chooses to focus on Allison Blair, a famous mutant known as Dazzler. The Beyonder's power is overwhelming in his attempts to seduce her, at first, but she starts to warm up to him when he suggests that her fear of him is similar to the way that humans fear mutants. They spend some time together with the Beyonder sharing some of his powers. However, the mutant realizes she simply can't love a being on this scale and flees. She is unable to control the new cosmic abilities given to her by the Beyonder, though, and nearly dies, sending the Beyonder into a rage. He destroys a faraway galaxy before calming down and returning Allison to health. When reawakened, she declares her unconditional love for the Beyonder, but he quickly recognizes that this is wrong. He is making her do this, and love is no good if it isn't real. He releases the control he has taken of her mind, and wipes away any memory she has of these events. Later, wandering alone outside of Washington, D.C., a train approaches the Beyonder. Annoyed at this intrusion, and with his view of humanity increasingly darkening, he dismantles the train, only saving the passengers at last minute when the cosmic being relents and shows them mercy. Among the wreckage, a young mutant named Tabitha, or Boom Boom, was on her way to join the X-Men before the train was destroyed. She insists on following the Beyonder, which he begrudgingly allows. Hours later, the Beyonder sets up camp with the women in the wilderness. Tabitha explains she was seeking out the legendary school for mutants after she fled home, due to her father's abuse, which has badly injured one of her eyes. She demonstrates her power, which is the ability to create small balls of explosive energy, and the Beyonder details his nature and experiences thus far on Earth. Tabitha deduces that based on who he is and his history, the Beyonder must be very lonely, but he rebuffs this, declaring it is finally time for him to go home. The mutant hugs him before he returns to his original universe, a domain entirely defined by his existence. But now alone, the Beyonder has trouble letting go of all these new experiences, when suddenly, his pants explode. Back on Earth, the Beyonder picks up Tabitha in a car, while she is attempting to hitchhike. He insists that he isn't mad at her for planting an energy bomb on him. In fact, he's somewhat grateful that she provoked his return to Earth. He even heals her eye to prove it. The Beyonder then personally takes Boom Boom to the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, but when she goes to the door, the X-Men are quick to recognize the Beyonder and attack. Of course, they are no match for this vastly superior foe, and he simply drives away. Boom Boom runs away, not trusting the X-Men and wanting to reunite with the Beyonder. She calls out to him, but is only able to successfully draw him out by threatening to kill herself. The Beyonder calls her out for this stupid behavior, but admits it was a successful means to draw him out. He offers to take the young woman for a ride, passing through the trees, literally, launching into the air, and flying off into the darkness of space. The Beyonder has decided that Earth is simply too small for him, and it's time to start expanding his horizons in this universe. He chooses to take Tabitha to the World Complex headquarters of the Celestials, massive cosmic beings that look over all of life in the universe. To the Beyonder, they're gently amusing. The oldest race in the universe, sure, but still just nothing in comparison to him. As the Beyonder shows Boom Boom around, she notices that everyone seems to know him by name. He explains that these aliens are a lot more intelligent and sophisticated than humans, and they can pick up on the sheer power of the Beyonder on sight. When Tabitha comments that the Celestials hardly even reacted to his arrival, he insists they've done nothing but focus on him since he entered this backwater universe to begin with. And when he came to the Worlds Complex, they've entered into a state of utter panic. She simply can't recognize it with her human senses. So he decides to show her something she can see a little better. I gotta say, I've heard a lot of bad things about Secret Wars 2, so you can imagine my surprise at just how much I enjoyed this thing. It is worth noting that for all the good this story does, it is written off as a bad story by a lot of fans for a reason. Reading this comic, it does feel like Marvel was surprised at the success of the first Secret Wars, and coupled with the huge waves that DC's Crisis of Infinite Earths was making at the time, they clearly pushed out Secret Wars 2 as quickly as they possibly could, given the relative publication date of these titles. You can read it in this story too. We jump around a lot in the plot, and everything seems to have been written on the fly by Jim Shooter, the writer of this story, likely with a lot of input from Al Milgrom, lead artist. The art does have a lot of great moments, and the people working on it clearly know what they're doing. Even though, because the story is set on Earth and not in the fantastical world of Battle Worlds, we don't get the wildly creative vistas and scenery of the first Secret Wars. Yet the artists of Secret Wars 2 do find ways to make some pretty creative choices throughout the series. I get the impression Al Milgram's a huge part of the creative thrust behind Secret Wars 2, though for simplicity's sake I'll mostly be referring to Jim Shooter in this video, though I expect Milgram had a lot of input in making Secret Wars into the story that it exists as. Still, it's not like Shooter wasn't involved with this story either. His thumbprints are all over this thing. I gotta say, I really like some of these moments we've covered so far. The fights with the Celestials was so damn great, and a display of just how powerful the Beyonder truly is. He just crushes some of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe like they're nothing. And that all puts our favorite Marvel characters in a wonderfully unique position. For there is really no other crossover event in Marvel or DC history quite like this. I have never read anything like this before in my life. Yes, the influence of Secret Wars and the Crisis of Infinite Earths is clearly felt here. But while we get great little tidbits of epic moments like the Celestial fight, more than anything, this is a story about the Beyonder taking a vacation on Earth. He learns about sentient life, bothers a bunch of people, and nearly destroys all of reality simply through the process of learning of the world around him. His staggering power instantly erases any traditional notion of pacing, tension, or grounding. Our main character, who's kind of both the protagonist and antagonist of the story, cannot be killed. There is nothing more powerful than him in this story. He has sparse motivation beyond very idle curiosity and has no real malicious goals in mind. There's no real plot for world domination here, since to the Beyonder, stuff like that is trivial. He conquers Earth in a page. That means nothing to him. Instead, we get a sort of re-examination of all the basic things in reality we would normally take for granted. And our usual cast of characters is just sort of around. So horribly outclassed in terms of power here, they have literally nothing they can possibly do other than flail helplessly against the Beyonder at sporadic moments throughout this crossover. That's the most different and out there story for a crossover I've ever seen. It makes it still, 35 years after the fact, profoundly unique compared to every other crossover event to have been created by Marvel and DC before and since then. That's really awesome. It makes it, to me, already a core Marvel crossover event worth your time. Easily better and more interesting than half of the other Marvel crossovers that have come in the last couple of decades. I was expecting an idiotic mess, a shallow, rushed-out sequel similar to Iron Man 2, the movie, and at times it very much does read like that still. But there's also a genuinely thoughtful story here under the backdrop of a superhero-style adventure that has some real, actual, sincere questions and thoughts about the meaning of life. Secret Wars 2, shockingly, could easily be used to explore ideas such as the social interactivity of human experience, a major field of theory work in sociology. It has stuff to say about death, digging into how important it is in giving life meaning. It has stuff to say about love and its value to humanity. Secret Wars 1 never did that. Hell, the modern remake didn't do anything like that either. And I like both of those stories, but you can imagine my surprise at how truly special certain aspects of Secret Wars 2 really is. And it would be really, truly awesome if I could just end my review of this story here. The Beyonder meets a man named Dave and explains to him the nature of the cosmic order of the universe. Thanks to Doctor Strange, the cosmic being now understands that existence in this universe is defined by a struggle between life and death. So the Beyonder partners with this human named Dave to begin working together to preserve life as best they can. It's not a challenge for this being who's so powerful he basically instantly becomes the greatest superhero to ever exist. So he decides to up his game. The Beyonder determines that the best solution for resolving this struggle between life and death is to simply kill Death, the entity herself. When the Beyonder pours a portion of his own power into a cup, with the intent of forcing Death to drink it so she will become overwhelmed and die, the Demon King Mephisto arrives and attempts to seize the cup for himself, desperate not to lose the opportunity to gain more wicked souls, which would happen were Death to end. Of course, the Beyonder easily repels this incursion, only for the mightiest beings in the entire universe to arrive, pleading with the Beyonder not to kill Death. They explain that killing her would fundamentally break the universe, and even though some of them are Death's sworn enemy, the Beyonder might not be able to fix the universe if he does this, but Dave insists everything will be fine. Oh crap, he actually did it. He broke the world, he killed Death, and nothing can ever age or die again. Life has essentially lost all meaning, there's no true imperative to advance society or technology anymore. Also, nobody can eat anything, because you can't digest living matter anymore. Oh man, let alone the cosmic replica. Never mind. See, it's moments like these, this actual exact moment here, where the Beyonder kills Death, instantly comes to regret it, and 2 panels later he's able to restore things back to normal, only with the sacrifice of that human named Greg. And even though it's explicitly stated in this comic that the Beyonder actually might not have been able to resurrect Death like that, he just does it anyways. Because the Beyonder is all powerful in this story and really has no limits. And while that's very cool and unique, it does kind of reveal this story's biggest and most obvious flaw. Before we get into that point too much, it's important to note that I really admire and respect Jim Shooter for not pulling back in terms of the Beyonder's power when he very easily could have. So this cosmic being is hardly ever kept in line and is consistently shown to be the most powerful being in the entire story. He does get conveniently reduced in power to service a story a couple of times, but not for the majority of the tale. And he doesn't get watered down to make things easier for the writing, nor is he pushed into the background like he was in the first Secret Wars. That's really genuinely brave for a writer, as doing any of these things would have made for an easier story. At first, I really thought featuring the Beyonder so heavily was Jim Shooter's biggest, deepest mistake in writing this story. I thought it was gonna break Secret Wars 2 and was the reason why so many people don't like this story. Looking over the whole project now, I think it's Secret Wars 2's greatest strength. There's something terrifying to any Marvel fan in seeing all these entities that are well defined as the most powerful beings to ever exist basically just show up to some restaurant on Earth and beg the Beyonder not to screw everything up. And knowing that they absolutely stand no chance against the Beyonder, that speaks volumes about the relative levels of power and the scale of what's going on in Secret Wars 2. The problem, or at least what in theory should break everything, is that nothing about this story should work on paper. Traditionally, in stories, you don't want a main character like the Beyonder running around too much, because realistically, nobody stands a reasonable chance against this being. The only way the heroes and the villains ever get an opportunity to defeat the being is when the Beyonder deliberately allows for such a situation and creates such an opportunity himself. It happens quite a few times here. The Avengers or the X-Men get together and they try to pummel the Beyonder, and it's completely pointless. A stupid effort every single time on their part. One that the Beyonder correctly points out as being utterly useless against his power. Even something like the Phoenix Force is just nothing, meaningless in his presence. The same goes for all these problems and changes the Beyonder introduces to Earth and the universe. None of that really matters when he can easily fix it in a moment. So when he kills Death, and it is directly hinted that this is something the Beyonder might not be able to reverse, he's still able to fix it instantly, just with the sacrifice of one man. So every problem introduced in this story is often just as quickly resolved, and we move on to the next thing. That's not how a story is usually structured, since it leads to the feeling like we're just on some weird theme park tour, being carted off from one elaborate set piece to the next, without that vital sense of continuity and connective tissue that most stories have and rely on in structuring their story around a single problem or dilemma. That's why I thought the focus on the Beyonder at first was a huge mistake. We don't have anything even resembling decent odds for both sides here. The Beyonder outclasses everybody's power combined. He isn't on some journey with some specific goal either. He's just here for some vague questions, and no force in the entire universe has a shred of a chance of stopping him. We are completely at the whims of what is a childish, and I admit, sometimes annoying character. He can be dangerous and destructive, or naive and careless. He's also benevolent at times, at least wanting to help those around him, but he also whines a lot, and very nearly does some very sketchy things throughout this tale. He has this weird way of talking with people that doesn't seem consistent with somebody who should be able to understand all aspects of human existence in an instant. He's so powerful he shouldn't ever struggle with learning or understanding anything, yet often his behavior resembles that of a child. If we as a human race cannot wrap our heads around things like basic economics or going to the bathroom, why does the Beyonder struggle with these things at all, rather than understand it better than any of us? On the other hand, sometimes he's very astute and very clever, able to easily deduce things that escape most human adults. It really shouldn't work, is what I'm saying. The whole story doesn't work. Secret Wars 2 breaks a sort of rules in storytelling that are pretty much never broken, to the extent I don't have a lot of examples to compare it to. Shooters breaking rules so fundamental to how writers are supposed to craft stories, it is remarkable that this crossover event is coherent, let alone entertaining and interesting. And at times, to be fair, it really doesn't make any sense. There are certainly moments when reading this comic I couldn't believe how silly or strange things were getting, for better or worse. Secret Wars 2 goes in so many different directions that it's all over the place, because it has to be. There's no problem the Beyonder can't solve instantly, so he just sort of solves every problem instantly, making the tone and pacing very unpredictable. One really interesting aspect of Secret Wars 2 is that on a normal day, any one of the Beyonder's actions could easily take up all the content of an entire Marvel crossover event. He kills Death, he wipes the floor with the Celestials, he conquers Earth and makes everyone a mindless slave, he slaughters a galaxy over a woman rejecting him. All of those things could easily be a big story on their own. Hell, some of them already are their own story on their own. And yet here they're just parts of a much larger individual narrative in a much larger series. On top of that, as I've covered, because the Beyonder can undo everything with a thought, none of these actions actually matter in this story. The whole death thing is never really brought up again, outside of the fact that the Beyonder has a slightly better understanding of sapient existence following this, and we just sort of move on. The maddening thing is not that this is happening, not that Jim Shooter is breaking all these storytelling rules, it's that Jim Shooter somehow kind of embraced and fully understood the scope and scale of what he was doing here, and just sort of ran with it. No matter how crazy or weird this story gets, we just sort of keep following things along to their natural conclusion. I don't know what combination of ambition, madness, and stupidity was involved in deciding to take this risk and make this the story of Secret Wars 2, but it evaporates any sense of tension in the story while making the pacing erratic and unstructured. So there are problems here, and pretty big problems too. This is not a perfect story, but, well, let's get into things a little bit more. The Beyonder returns home, physically exhausted. Dave sacrificed himself so Death could return, after understanding the enormous implications of Death having been erased. In response, Mephisto goes increasingly discontent with the fact that the entire universe has essentially fallen to the whims of the one from beyond. Frustrated with this, he concocts a massive scheme to take advantage of the Beyonder's now weakened state, which would be kept vulnerable by a massive, crazy machine designed and built by Mephisto. The plan fails when the machine melts down in hell due to the sheer enormity of its own power. Inspired by this, the Beyonder considers taking up a new role with helping others find their place in this world and finding their own purpose. In doing so, he might find a purpose in his life. He tries to help a Native American man calling himself Puma, but finds the experience frustrating. The cosmic being instead looks for help from what by now has become the closest thing to his own true peer and friend, Owen Reese, the only being in this universe with nearly enough power to come close to understanding the Beyonder's perspective and existence. Owen suggests that maybe the Beyonder's issue is that he simply can't understand what it is to be something that the Beyonder is not, mortal. But the Beyonder ignores this, setting out to San Francisco where he begins messing around with the city, with a slightly more violent and dangerous edge than usual, only to be attacked by the X-Men. They make a desperate gambit to try and stop this being from meddling in their universe once and for all. by having Rachel Summers become the Phoenix. The Beyonder comments that maybe if he had left himself deliberately vulnerable, this plan might have had a slight chance of working. When he asks just what the X-Men were thinking, Rachel points out that he was the one that forced this fight by attacking this city. They were just doing what they could to defend themselves. The Beyonder, stunned at his own actions, vanishes, but it makes a distinct change in his overall demeanor. Increasingly, he begins to argue with more and more of the heroes that he encounters before outright lashing out at Molecule Man. This causes Volcana to panic and break up with Owen, and the Beyonder to openly begin musing about rendering this entire universe inert. So Secret Wars 2 breaks an awful lot of rules in storytelling, yet like I've said, it's wildly entertaining and vivid. Just because something breaks rules doesn't mean it is bad. It just presents problems that this story has to compensate for, and in my opinion it does. I can see why some people don't like this. There are long stretches of simple, dialogue-heavy panels, and an awful lot of backsliding on the Beyonder's character. So it feels like he's constantly relearning similar lessons over and over again throughout the 8 issues of Secret Wars 2. And a few times throughout this story, like I said, a being this powerful really doesn't need to learn a lot, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to begin with. But on the whole, between its completely unique plotline compared to every other Marvel and DC crossover event I've ever read, and the shockingly sophisticated moments and ideas peppered throughout this series, Secret Wars 2 is pretty damn awesome. This is totally worth your time, and there is some really solid artwork worth checking out. One thing that should be noted, and it might go a ways to explain why this story has always produced mixed feelings within the fan community, is that this is nothing like the other Secret Wars stories. Aside from the involvement with the Beyonder, they're hardly related at all. That's not a complaint, by the way. If anything, it's a huge compliment, because it's something I love about Secret Wars 2. But a person going in expecting a standard sequel to Secret Wars, they're going to be severely disappointed. But different is what makes this story so interesting. A carbon copy of the original Secret Wars, a true rip-off of the Crisis of Infinite Earths, those were the sort of things that would have produced the worst type of sequel. This story is exactly what a sequel should be. Its own thing that follows up on the original, but with its own identity and goals in mind. I have a lot of love for the original and modern take on Secret Wars, but this weird, brilliant story was a total surprise and a fun experience overall, in spite of a handful of dry moments. I really thought I was in for a disaster. Jim Shooter does not exactly have a perfect record when it comes to these sort of comics. But I wound up liking this thing a lot more than I expected to. Way more. It might not be my all-time favorite Marvel event, it certainly isn't the best thing ever, but I definitely like it at least vaguely on the level of the first Secret Wars, and that really says something. Sure, I like these two stories for very different reasons, but I enjoyed them both about the same, and that's pretty great overall. So yeah, I definitely recommend Secret Wars 2. Perhaps it's because of one other aspect I really like, and it's something that really sets itself apart from even the best of comic book events, including the first Secret Wars. Secret Wars 2 has a fantastic ending. Yes, this story is a kind of unicorn in the comic book community. Fabled, theoretically possible, but never actually encountered in the wild. So to close out this video, I present to you a little snippet of an actual, proper ending to a comic book crossover event. Thanks a lot for watching this video and checking it out. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did making it. The Beyonder looks over the Earth, prepared to erase all of existence. The heroes of this planet are gathering in one final desperate bid to stop him. Before he destroys it all, the Beyonder returns to his home, ranting about his experiences in front of a camera, where he reveals that he's decided to give mortal existence a try, as Owen suggested, before he finally destroys it all. He concocts a device designed to temporarily siphon off the Beyonder's phenomenal powers and transfer his consciousness into a new, significantly weaker, and completely mortal body. When he does so, he finds the experience fascinating. And with only a handful of minor interruptions to bother him, a demon army and an army of superheroes, that sort of stuff, the Beyonder begins to repeatedly turn himself into a mortal, enjoying the experience and immediacy of entropy and decay. At some point, the heroes are able to get to his headquarters while he's still in the process of growing a new mortal body. They find the Beyonder still in the form of an infant without all of his power or the ability to defend himself. While this is the first real chance the heroes have of stopping the Beyonder, Reed Richards goes out of his way to stop the others from destroying what appears to be a baby. But the Molecule Man declares that the Beyonder must die, and destroys the entire machine. Though it appeared the death of the Beyonder would have meant the destruction of everything, the destructive wave that flowed out from him abruptly stops, and things return to normal. Owen and Marcia reunite, and Captain America thanks for the Molecule Man for finally stopping the Beyonder, though he wishes there would have been a better way. Owen agrees, saying that this battle has injured him in a way that he thinks no doctor will ever be able to heal. But it was all necessary and worth it, because the Beyonder is dead, and that's really all that matters to Owen right now. Far away, at the direction of the Molecule Man, a portal opens, and flailing power pours into it. The power is unimaginable and is exploding with fury and fire. Met with no resistance and an empty void, the energy pours out into it. It begins to cool, forming protomatter before taking on the form of actual substance. The masses form into objects, stars, and then even planets. Life begins to evolve and flourish, and mortal beings with finite lives give meaning to the infinity within which they dwell.